Shadow of the Erdtree is right around the corner, and if you're keen to get into the expansion but are feeling stuck with defeating the bosses required to enter the Land of Shadow, then this is the video for you. My name is Hazeblade, I'm an Elden Ring speedrunner, and if you watch until the end, I'll show how you can destroy Mohg and Radahn and enter the Elden Ring expansion right away on June 21st. To quickly dispatch Mohg and Radahn, we're going to want a high output build that will allow us to skip through the phases of each boss. For this video, I've chosen a Comet Azure build, which when used properly, can absolutely annihilate most bosses with little to no effort whatsoever. But before we begin melting bosses with it, we need to get a quick understanding of how it works, and how to overcome its many caveats. First and foremost, to even cast it at all, we need 60 intelligence, which pretty much removes it as a viable spell in the early game despite how easy it is to get. Second, the cast time is unusually long as it's considered a channeled spell, which of course leaves us vulnerable to incoming attacks while we wind up and then proceed to channel it. Then if we do manage to cast it, it will absolutely destroy our FP bar. Now that we understand what it is and how it works, we're going to overcome those barriers with a specially tailored setup so that we can easily defeat both bosses even at a relatively low level. To set up the build for Radahn, we'll need to be somewhere around level 30 to 45 depending on starting class so we can achieve the following stats. Now don't worry about vigor for this build, we'll get hit once during the fight, but even without armor and at the lowest amount of vigor possible, we'll survive. These stats, however, will allow us to wield a weapon called the Sword of Night and Flame, which boasts not one, but two Ashes of War, and Comet Azure is one of them. The Ash of War variant actually solves all the issues that the spell itself presents. The weapon can be wielded at a much lower level, and while the Ash doesn't deal quite as much damage and has a fixed duration, we won't have much trouble with it since Radahn is only a mid-game boss. Feel free to level as much as you want beforehand if you decide to take extra vigor, but again, I recommend you be between level 30 and 45 depending on your starting class. Once you're there, or at a level that you're comfortable with, you'll need to go out and get the following items. For our weapons, we'll use the Sword of Night and Flame at +7. Sonaf is located inside a building in the Caria Manor accessible from the ramparts. You can get the stones to reach +4 from EG, and the rest of the stones for +7 from Altus Plateau, Volcano Manor, or Leandel if you have 2 great runes already. We'll want the Finger Seal, which can be purchased from the Twin Maiden Husks in the Round Table Hold for 800 runes. And for our talismans, we'll prioritize the Ritual Sword Talisman, which you can find in a chest at the Lux Ruins in Altus Plateau, after defeating Demi-Human Queen Gilka. We'll grab the Graven School Talisman found behind an illusory wall in the Academy of Raya Lucaria just before the Debate Parlor, and we'll also want the Blue Dancer Charm, which you'll get by defeating the Guardian Golem at the High Road Cave in Limgrave. And finally, we'll get the Magic Scorpion Charm, which is obtained by giving Celavis the Amber Starlight as a part of his questline. If you're locked out of the quest to obtain this talisman, you can kill Alexander for the Warrior Jar Shard, or grab any other talisman that gives you extra stats or damage and stack it with Godric's Great Rune. For our flasks, we'll want at least one flask allocated to the Flask of Cerulean Tears, and inside of our Physic Flask, we're going to want the Cerulean Hidden Tear and the Magic Shrouding Crack Tear. You can get the Cerulean Hidden Tear from the Ulcerated Tree Spirit guarding the Minor Erdtree in Mount Gelmir, and the Magic Shrouding Crack Tear from the Erdtree Avatar near the Minor Erdtree in northeastern Liurnia. The only actual spell we need for Radahn is Golden Vow, which can be found at the Corpse Stench Shack at the end of the path near the Broken Bridge to Mount Gelmir. And as for additional items which are totally optional, we can get Godric's Great Rune, which is recommended if you don't have the Magic Scorpion Charm. Of course, you'll also want some rune arcs to go with that. You can also grab the Spellblade set, which you can actually get from Roger early by enlisting with Ranni. We do this anyway for the Magic Scorpion Charm, so it should be fairly convenient, but keep in mind, we can do this fight without armor. The Spellblade set boosts sorceries if you want to have armor on, but just remember that by adding equip load, we reduce the efficacy of the Blue Dancer Charm. So all this really does is offset some of the damage we're losing and gives us a small amount of armor. And finally, you'll want some larval tears, at least 3 if you're changing builds for this guide. Once you've collected these items, head over to Radahn's fortress in southeastern Caelid, get naked, and prepare for battle. Before entering the teleporter, cast Golden Vow and two-hand the Sword of Night and Flame. Immediately after entering, mount up on Torrent while moving directly away from Radahn and keep dashing until he despawns. If done quickly enough, the gravity arrow he's trying to shoot will also despawn. From here, it's safe to approach him. Radahn should fire an arrow out into oblivion, put away his bow, and switch to his Starscourge greatswords. While approaching him, drink a Cerulean Flask, and after reaching the open area past the summons, strafe on Torrent until Radahn performs this attack. When he uncrosses his arms, move directly towards him, and once he lunges, perform a Dismount Strong attack, immediately followed by a Comet Azure. Get close to him and between his legs while he picks up his swords, and as soon as he lifts his leg, cast another Comet Azure. He'll start phasing now, which is RQ to strafe left around his legs until he bangs the hilts of his swords together. Once this happens, drink the Physic Flask and immediately follow up with another Comet Azure. If timed correctly, he should pull us in with his gravity spell as soon as ours ends. Now when he does this, it can go one of two ways depending on how we're positioned. If we stay close to him after he pulls us in, he'll follow up with a slam, which can be avoided by getting behind him and performing a Comet Azure, which should have built enough stagger on him by now to break his posture. Simply follow up once more with Comet Azure, and he's dead. The other thing that can happen is if we're not close enough after he pulls us in, he won't follow up with the slam, and he'll run away and go ride a Comet of his own and try to kill us. If that happens, don't worry. We can carefully reinsert ourselves next to him as he lands and finish him off while he's trying to summon his pet rocks. And that's it. We've bested Radahn and are well on our way to entering the Land of Shadow. But we still have one more boss to kill. Preparing for Mohg isn't nearly as involved as Radahn since we'll be using most of the items from earlier in the setup, but we will need to gather a few things to round out the build. For starters, we'll need to be high enough level to push all the way to 60 intelligence, which is level 50 to 61 depending on starting class, before we acquire the following items. At this point, we will need 2 great runes for the shackle, but since we've defeated Radahn, we already have one of them. We'll be using the actual Comet Azure spell for this one, which can be found by interacting with Primeval Sorcerer Azure past the Hermit Village in Mount Gelmir. We'll also want Mogh's Shackle, which you can get in Leyndell Underground in the Subterranean Shunning Grounds. And for our weapon, we'll want Lusat's Glintstone Staff, which can be found in a chest after defeating the Nox Duo in Celia Town of Sorcery in Caelid, and should be upgraded to +9. If you've already defeated Morgott in your playthrough, you'll have a lot more options as far as getting your Somber Smithing Stones 8 and 9, but if you haven't defeated Morgott yet, you can get them from the Dragon Barrow in Caelid. We'll also need one more spell for this build, which is Terra Magica. You can find that after defeating the Crystallian bosses at the end of Academy Crystal Cave and taking the elevator up to Raya Lucaria Academy. We'll be using the same talismans as before, but if you have the Graven Mass talisman from the Consecrated Snowfield, you can use that instead of the Graven School talisman or the Magic Scorpion charm if you were locked out of the quest to obtain it. We'll also use the same tiers in the Physic Flask, of course, and don't forget to memorize the spells that we just got. You'll need 4 total memory slots for these spells, and since we start with 2 and we're already doing Sullivan's quest for the Magic Scorpion charm, we can get the one in his tower for free, and we can also buy one at the Round Table Hold for 3,000 runes. If you'd rather use those runes for something else though, feel free to get the memory stones from any of the towers or by defeating the Red Wolf of Radagon in the Academy of Raya Lucaria. Just like Radahn, we can do this fight naked, so once you've got your build ready, 2-hand your staff and enter the boss arena. Now, if you haven't triggered this boss before, I highly recommend you quit out after triggering him the first time so you can start further away. After entering the Fog Gate, take roughly 15 steps forward and cast Terra Magica and immediately follow up with Mogh's Shackle. While he's down, drink the Physic Flask and start channeling Comet Azure. From there, all you need to do is continue channeling the spell and watch Mogh's health rapidly deplete while he mindlessly counts down his death in Latin.
I can see it as clear as day. The coming of our dynasty. Mohg.
Congratulations! You've defeated the necessary bosses to enter the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion. Thanks so much for watching. If you're looking to do more to prepare for your journey into the Land of Shadow, check out these videos. I'm Hazeblade, and for all things gaming, keep it here on IGN. And also twitch.tv/Hazeblade.